during the pre-registration, we were expecting lower numbers than we got. In fact, I think I spoke to Steve today. We expect if we got half of what we had registered, it would be successful. And in fact, we've got everyone. So there's also AusDBF members, other state members, and pre-registered was some from overseas Dragon Boat clubs. So it looks like we got the message out. It's our first paddle up series, and Steve, you've sort of gone global. So you know, well done to kick that off.
Thanks.
So if, guys, what I'm going to do is just quickly, just about to get underway, and I think Ramsey's actually going to start recording, and it looks like he is. So Mike, if everyone's ready, we'll get underway, because this is our new initiative that we set up. But what we wanted to do was put everyone, you know, get everyone together and try and upskill everyone in the areas that you have all highlighted as an area of identification throughout the checklists and the various health checks we've actually done. So these series, the Paddle Up series, will occur every the first week of each month for at least the next 12 months. That's how much content we've got so far. And we'll take important topics and apply that to help upskill our members, as I mentioned before. The Paddle Up series will take challenging topics and I guess try and make sense of it, and then give you practical tips on how to apply them. And I guess the first topic to kick it off was really a really relevant one in trying times at the moment. Tonight we're talking all things risk and emergency management with our first subject matter expert of Steve Leahy. Just a bit of background for Steve. He's had a long career in safety, risk management, and emergency management, having worked in emergency services all his life. Most recently, he was the Chief Executive Officer of the Westpac Helicopters in New South Wales, and formerly the CEO of Yacht in New South Wales. So a good sporting element there as well. Steve has lectured extensively around the world on coastal safety, change management, leadership, strategic planning, as well as having a number of articles published in peer-reviewed journals. He holds qualifications in business management, leadership, public safety, risk management, and aviation. His collaborative approach has overhauled safety and risk systems in Australia's largest sporting events and is now benchmarked as best practice. He's a certified practicing risk manager and a member of the Risk Management Institute of Australasia, an associate of the Australian Risk Policy Institute, and a member of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. He continues his community involvement as a Justice of the Peace. Steve is still an active surf lifesaver with Fingal Beach at Nelson Bay. And for all of you, Steve is really familiar, or started to become really familiar with Dragon Boats New South Wales in recent times, having been our independent risk advisor throughout COVID. So the COVID information that you've been seeing is being checked and challenged by Steve, as well as supporting us with the new development of our safety operations manual. And this, remember, that's available for everyone hosting a regatta. So that was a good, I tried to memorize all that, Steve. I hope I got it all right. So over to you, mate. And for anyone, if you've got a question, please throw it in the chat line. We're going to try and open up the Q&A a little bit later. It's going to go for about an hour or 55 minutes now. And what we'll try and do is Steve will do a presentation. I'll sit with him and ask him a few questions based on some pre-questions I received earlier. Question him on that, and then open it to the floor for everyone to actually ask a few more questions, and then we'll knock it off at about 7, if that's all right. So we'll get underway, and over to you, Steve.
Thanks very much, Shane. And I take it my screen's now up on your screen there, Shane or Ramsey?
Yeah, all good.
Fantastic. Juliet, congratulations to you on becoming a grandma. I've got, it is only tea in my cup, but cheers to you and congratulations.
Steve, the only thing, mate, just sorry to jump in, is sure. You've got the Zoom, everyone's faces up, so I can see everyone on that first page, including myself, talk. So if you want to minimise that, we'll be able to see your, there we go. You're good to go. That? Yeah, I'll mute myself now. Perfect.
Thank you, mate. Thank you for doing that. So let's get into this and welcome to this this first one. As Shane mentioned, there's quite a few from right around the country on this, and I think when Shane was briefing me earlier today, there was someone from India joining us. So welcome. My colleagues in Victoria are thinking of you. I know you must be doing it tough, but hopefully not long to go down there. Let's have a look at risk management and sports safety for you. My background, as Shane mentioned, particularly was around surf lifesaving. and I became involved with their major events. They actually, in the last few years, they've had a couple of people tragically die during their Australian Championships. I was brought in then to completely overhaul their management systems at their major events, and then became in charge of their emergency management, their risk, their safety. And these were big events like the Coolangatta Gold and the Nutrigrain Ironman series. What we're going to have a look at tonight is we're going to talk a little bit about risk and some of the technical definitions and provide a little bit of clarity around that for you. I think one of the important things is what are the benefits of risk management. I'll mention it a number of times over the next 45 minutes or so about the negative connotation that risk has. In fact, risk is a real opportunity, and we'll touch on that shortly. The process around risk management, how you apply it, and we've got a sample risk plan taken straight out of DRAGO Boats New South Wales Risk Register. We'll show you some resources, and then towards the end of the session, I'll touch a bit on sports safety and what safety at an event or even a training session will look like for you. If we have a look at the Australian standard 31,000, updated only 18 months ago, there is the two definitions on your screen. Risk is about the effect of uncertainty on objects, on your objectives, and risk management are the activities that direct and control an organisation with regard to risk. Now, there's a whole heap of other definitions in there. Some of those are on your screen, such as consequence, likelihood, risk source. Stakeholder is an important one. You'll see them right throughout the night, and I'll touch on those as we go through those. So if we were to break down the definition of risk, it's an uncertain event or condition that if it occurs, it's going to have a negative, but it also can have a positive effect on at least one of your objectives. You know, you want to run an event, weather could be a risk, those sort of things. Okay. It's an event that occurs in the future, and it's described through the probability, and another term is likelihood, that the probability of likelihood that that event will occur. And should that happen, if that issue occurs, what's the impact and the consequence? So they're the two ways we measure it. And as I said earlier, risk has a real negative connotation around it. It's got this feel that it's the big stick thing. It's one of those things we have to do because we're obliged to do it, and those sort of things. I want to touch on, I'll tell you, I'm just going to change that slide there for a tick. The two other terms that get used interchangeably, but they're both very, very different, is a hazard. It's a situation, it's the source, it's got potential to harm a person, and that's what we generally think, but it could be cause damage to property or the environment, or it could be financial, a financial issue, it could be a reputational issue. And the risk is the chance of something happening when you're exposed to that risk. So if we think as an example, a worker's using a petrol operated pump in a confined space. And let's say it's a narrow well or something like that. Now, the carbon monoxide is the hazard. The associated risk is the likelihood that the worker might suffer carbon monoxide poisoning while working in that, and he'll become ill. If we put it into a dragon boat environment, say a member goes dragon boating, it's windy, there's a decent chop on the water. In that situation, the conditions, those weather and water conditions are the hazard. The associated risk is that the boat might overturn, the member becomes distressed and could even possibly drown. I'm just putting my chat screen, not that one, I can see you all anyway. I'm just going to do this thing. Let me move this across here. So I'm going to open the chat thing there, Ramsey, if I could. And what I want to have a think about is, here's a scenario for you. You're on a plane. that plane is going to crash. There is absolutely no doubt at all that you're going to die. When that crashes, you're going to die. Luckily, on board the plane, there's a parachute. It's fully operational. You've actually been trained to use it, but you're jumping out at 10,000 feet at speed, and you've never used a parachute apart from training. What's the bigger risk? You staying on the plane, and just put P in the chat area for plane, or J for jumping out. Which one's the bigger risk? J for jumping out. And I'm trying to have a look at the chat. There we go. So a lot of people are saying P, the bigger risk is staying on the plane. Quite a few are saying J for jumping out. Jumping out is the bigger risk, because if you remember what we were saying earlier in regards to the definition of risk, it's about uncertainty. If you stay on the plane, there's no shadow of a doubt, you're going to die. There is no risk or issue about that. It's a problem for you, absolutely, but it's not a risk because it's certain. Risk is about uncertainty. So that's an interesting one. It's something we play with a little bit, and that tries and brings it back into perspective for you. All right, let's kick on. Some of the benefits of risk management, and there's a whole heap. There's not many downsides to risk management. Okay, by doing a solid risk management process, we can identify and existing and potential problems. We certainly make better decisions. Our events, our sporting events, even our training sessions become more resilient. You can see all them up on your screen there. A couple of the real values out of this is that it protects our people and protects our assets. And we have fewer nasty surprises. People joining a sporting organisation really these days are really looking at, in terms of their participation, is it a safe event? Is it a safe sporting activity? Is it a safe sporting organisation? And there are organisations out there that have been bitten as a result of some of the issues that they've faced. And some of those have ended up in front of the coroner. And as I mentioned earlier on, surf lifesaving was one of those. The process, that clip there on your screen is straight out of the international standard. It's changed ever so slightly, and I think it actually makes it more difficult to understand. This one is straight out of the old standard. It's exactly the same. You'll see a couple of words at the side there, a coastal public safety risk assessment. Forget those words. I used them in a presentation earlier today, but this makes it a lot clearer for you to understand. We're establishing the context. We do the risk assessment, which is that centre box, and then we treat the risks. The whole time communicating, monitoring, reviewing, and it's an ever evolving cycle. It kicks off with consultation. Now, in your planning of your events, do this from the get-go. Have a think, consult with, if you're trying to plan, you're identifying what are some of the challenges, some of the risks around your event. Have a chat to your competitors. And the other side of this is if something happens during your event, conditions are changing, these are some of the other people you can have a chat to as well. So competitors, some of the officials, your team managers and your coaches. If you're at a venue that is overseen by a lifeguard service or local rangers or waterways, have a chat to those guys. Chances are events have been conducted there previously. Communicate, consult with those guys. If you need to make a risk-based decision during an event, don't be pressured, okay? Sometimes you feel like you're really under the pump to make a quick decision. and everyone's actually, people want to get on and do things and play the game, but don't feel pressured. There's nothing wrong with actually finishing the race that you're in, but don't start the next race, the next event, the next heat, until you're actually clear in your own mind and your organising committee are clear around you. Consultation is really good. I often suggest seek independent advice, particularly from subject matter experts, and that could be other athletes that are with you. One of the challenges with the consultation is, and when you make these risk decisions, is that you need to consider the lowest denominator. So all parties that are involved. If you're competing at a championships event, let's say it's more participation around, except people are there for the medals and to represent their country and things like that. But there will be other people there that are there just to have a crack and to say that they've competed at a national or a state event. So your risk assessment and your consultation needs to take into consider the weakest, the lowest denominator, the weakest athletes, and those sort of things. And that really is important to consider when we do that. But when we're undertaking our risk assessment, before we actually got to jump in and identify what those risks are. And some of those for us in a sporting environment, particularly one that's an aquatic-based event, is, and you'll understand a lot of these straight up, I'm sure, is that things like the weather, the water, or if you're competing outside the heads, the surf conditions, water quality is really very important. The lack of safety and medical personnel, equipment that you're using, whether it's the boats that you're in or your ancillary equipment that is around you. What's your communication strategy? Do you have a radio network, whether it's just some two-way radios or a walkie-talkie? Is there contingencies in that if they fail? Lack of planning, and you can see there I've listed a range of plans in big events that you will consider some of these. Do we need to do this in a training session? No, you don't. But having said that, is that you should have a plan in place that if I said to you that Betty Smith, and hopefully there's no Betty Smith on the line tonight, but if Betty Smith has a heart attack, what are we going to do? You're out in the middle of the water and Betty has a heart attack and falls overboard. What's your plan to deal with that? So they're those sort of things that you're considering. Decision-making process, and we'll talk about that later on. Obviously, approvals, particularly if you're on enclosed waterways, from maritime, they'll want to know about those. You've got the right insurances, and that's part of your application process. And then you're looking at the capabilities of your participants and the types of events, whether it's a 2K paddle versus a 5K paddle. Different risks will come into place around there. When you're identifying risks, don't just think about the safety side of things as well, if I could suggest to you. Have a think about some of the other things around, say, reputational risk. How's it going to play out on the front page of the Daily Telegraph? Will our actions, our behaviours or lack of behaviour or performance, do they cause a problem for the organisation or our sponsors and those sort of things? So keep an eye on there's some of the other risks that you should also consider. Once we've identified the risks, and the good news is that that generally has been done for you through DRAGO Boats New South Wales, and I know Shane and Ramsey and the team have got quite a significant risk register, which I've had a look at, and it's not bad at all actually. So I'm sure that they're happy to share it with you. Once you've identified your risks, you're going to need to assess them. What's the probability of that risk occurring, and what's the impact if it does occur? Okay, and you can see there is that the risk matrix or the table there It identifies the likelihood, and that's on our left-hand side, from rare to almost certain. You can see there that certain is not there because risk is always based around uncertainty and the level of the likelihood. And then you've got the impact from, you know, pretty much nothing being insignificant through to extremes. And they're color coded there, and that's good practice to have that color coded. And I'll show you a good example shortly as to how that color code can benefit you in a risk management sense. And when you start looking at your risk scores, if I were to say, you know, you're having a look at these numbers here, let's say have a look at this H15 here. It's simply a multiplication of this 5 and 3. So it's simply, this 8 is 2, and 2 by 4 gives you that number there. And then that starts helping you grade the severity or the importance of those risks. The heat map and those metrics becomes quite important for you. Once we've assessed the risk, we need to do something about it. We've identified the risk, we've decided we understand what the probability and the impact is. I know the big terms. I'm going to give you an example in just a moment. The thing is now we need to move something from if your risk is likely and the impact is high, you want that moved. You need to mitigate that risk. And some of the ways you can do that in an event, easy stuff like water safety, first aid, communications strategy, and that's, you know, as I said earlier, 2 ways. But if something does happen, who's going to call 000? Who's going to have that role of calling 000? Who's going to have the role of making sure they, you know exactly where you are for the ambulance to attend, those sort of things. You can modify your events, make them shorter if need be. Like we've been doing through the whole COVID scenarios. In the early stages, we had less people in the boats. You can delay or cancel, postpone or cancel certain events if risk groups involved in those events are at higher levels of risk. You can consider changing your venue instead of a open waterway to a more enclosed waterway, a more protected, more sheltered venue. And you can certainly delay or cancel all events. And sadly, that's one of the strategies that is being employed with COVID. And you can see in the early days, your regattas were canned, and now going through in line with the Office of Sport, some of those strategies are being implemented again, mitigating the risk by clubs competing just within their own regions. So you've made the decision, you mitigated the risk, you need to monitor and review it. You need to make sure that everything you've done, every decision you've made actually doesn't worsen it. What you want is to make sure it's improving your risk capability, and you're tracking the progress of that. And you can see on this straight out, is that it's this cycle that keeps going around. Every time something changes, you're assessing it, treating it if need be, talking to people, monitoring and reviewing. And that cycle keeps going over and over. The good news is generally once you're all on board, and regattas, you've been to many of those, your risk management strategies are fairly easy to monitor. I mentioned earlier on a sample risk plan, and this is straight out of the Dragon Boats New South Wales risk register. So risk 109 is a dragon boat overturning during a training session. The outcome, obviously, or the risk is injury to paddlers. So without doing anything at all, the likelihood of that happening it's possible. Remember earlier on we had rare to unlikely, possible, probable, and highly likely or almost certain. So this is possible. So this is middle of the road, and the impact is moderate. But there is potential for some injuries, major first aids, things like that. So that takes your risk level to high. So you need to do something about that. Okay, what your plan is, you need to bring that down. And the way we do that is you bring in your mitigation or those control actions. And again, in line with the Dragon Boat New South Wales Risk Register, the mitigation strategies for this particular, for 109, is mandatory swim tests for sweeps and mandatory swim tests for paddlers. So if you do end up in the water, you actually have the ability to survive. We're not suggesting that you're going to do an Ian Thorpe swim. You just want to be able to know that if you end up in the water, you actually have enough proficiency to stay afloat and survive. So by introducing those control actions, the possibility remains the same, but the impact is actually, it has been well and truly lowered to minor. And you can see the risk level has been moved from a high down to a medium. That's good. That's good news. Someone has to take responsibility for that. We usually call them the risk owners. That could be an event manager if you're at a regatta. It could be a sweep. It could be a coach. It could be the safety officer at your event, sweep coordinators back in your clubs. Those sort of things will have the responsibility for making sure that those things occur. Now you can see here what I've done. What we're trying to do is take this from a high level and reduce the risk. If we have a look at Dragon Boat New South Wales, what we call a heat map, which I mentioned earlier, they're the same, similar colours, and this is their entire risk register that's up on the screen. And you can see the numbers equate to different sections of the board's strategy, of the board's business units, and those sort of things. And the idea is you're out to reduce everything. And you have a look across, you can see this one, number 8 is your IT. You're moving it across here. 6 is membership numbers. Okay, again, we've moved that in. That's an extreme one. We've been able to move that down to a high level. And that's exactly what our plan is. A good risk management process, a good risk management strategy is, you'll never eliminate risk. Believe me, ladies and gents, you're not going to eliminate risk. The idea is, it's a term called ALARP, A-L-A-R-P, and you're trying to bring your risk to low as reasonably practicable. And that's what we're doing here. You can see there's a lowering of each of those major risks. So good news there. In this risk part here, there's lots and lots of stuff you can do. On this screen here, I've put up some resources, and I know you're recording this. Shane will have and the office will have a copy of this presentation. Here are some good resources. About 12 months ago, did some work with Dragon Boats in creating a safety operations manual. That's a really good guide, and you can use that for a small regatta right through to a major event, and that's available on the organisation's website. The New South Wales Office of Sport on their webpage has heaps of good resources. Some of the others that I found around the place is Safe Work South Australia's got a very good document around event safety, and there are a couple of other things there. If you're planning a big event, obviously you'll be doing it in conjunction with Dragon Boats New South Wales, but New South Wales Police, both locally and they're through their major event unit, are very good. They'll provide great support. Certainly from a maritime, roads and maritime, again, should look after you there. I found a resource that I've referred to in my work, the Gascoyne Development Commission. Have a Google that, and there's some good stuff there. And Surf Life Saving Australia, and I'm happy to provide a lot of their resources. Just don't tell them, and you're welcome to that. Right, so that's what risk management 101 looks like. It's about identifying your risks, making your event, your organisation safer, and use it as opportunities. And we turn around, and as I mentioned earlier, it's got this negative connotation. It's the big stick thing, and we don't like it generally. But if you use risk as an opportunity, some really good things can happen if you open your mind up to that. And we may touch on that later if I get that opportunity. Let's have a look a little bit at sport safety. This is around your events, and I want to touch on here some planning stuff, safety personnel, and I know the discussions with Shane tell me that this may be a challenge for you in terms of membership numbers. The decision-making process, complaint management. We'll spend a little bit of time on dealing with emergency situations, and then again I'll provide you or identify some resources that should give you some further direction into looking at this sort of stuff if you're really interested in it. Planning for your event should happen, I'm not talking about how many sausage rolls and party pies we need for the debrief later on. This is around your planning for your safety and your risk at your event. So this is where these comments are coming from. That top comment is straight out of your documentation. It's on the website. So DRAGO Boats New South Wales straight up identify that there's a requirement for a minimum standard of safety. No matter the size of the event, you have to do that. One of the other things around is your organising committees for your events in your planning stages look at competition and non-competition safety matters. Can I suggest that don't leave the safety and risk and emergency management staff till the day before your event. Get involved in this, appoint your safety officer, your emergency management coordinator at the earliest stages of planning. Let them get on with their job, let them identify the risks, identify the people involved. We spoke earlier about those stakeholders. So get them involved in that to look at it. And don't forget, when you're looking at safety and risk at your event, don't forget the back of house stuff. We still have those issues of, what electrical cords do we have lying around? What are the chances of some other issues that may bite us? It's not just, it's vehicle movements. It's not just about someone getting into trouble on the water. So in your planning stages, your field of play, your back of house are just as equally as important as each other. At an event, and I understand talking to Shane and the team earlier on over the last week or so as we planned this session, that there are some challenges around this, providing safety personnel, simply because as a small organisation, as a small club, you may not have all of these people. But these people do exist in our clubs, and at any big event, a bigger regatta, you certainly need a safety officer. At a national championships, you may need a couple of those people. If you're going to have 2 or more safety officers, only one person can be in charge. Someone ultimately makes the hard decisions, makes the hard recommendations. So think about that. Your medical and first aid coordinator, that's reasonably easy. If you're at training, identify who's got the first aid certificate in the group. Where's your first aid kit at your clubhouse or at your facilities? Do you know where to run and get it if you need it? Some of those easy things. Water safety personnel. In a major event, are they present, or are they just another club member that's in the club boat and he'll do the job for you? So don't think that this is a real challenge for you. What I do suggest for you though is this one: the qualification is really important. I'm afraid I'm going to emphasise that one for you. I've been involved in several sports and provided advice to several sports after they've fronted the coroner. And one of the common themes that comes out of the coroner and police investigations, or maybe work cover or RMS investigations, is that the people doing the job that were appointed to the safety officer's role or the emergency role or the first aid role, they actually weren't qualified to do the job. So if you're going to put someone in there, despite them being well-meaning and having to have a crack at it, make sure they're trained up to do that. Be prepared. I mentioned earlier on, or even at a training session, make sure you're prepared for anything that might occur. We mentioned earlier on about just even knowing who's got the first aid ticket, where the first aid kit is. Let me assure you, one of the most challenging things to do is to make a wise decision. I mentioned earlier on about don't feel pressured in making decisions. Consult, provide advice. If in a major event, a major regatta, I've often urged safety officers, emergency officers, that they make recommendations to the organising committee. There is nothing worse than being hung out to dry because you're the one that's made the decision. And make recommendations to the event organising committee. Let them as a committee make those decisions. I mentioned earlier on about the lowest common denominator. Again, really quite important to do that. If I was going to offer you some advice, ladies and gents, in regards to complaint management, it would be that you take them seriously. Any complaint needs to be taken seriously. And I'm going to hark back to my time in surf lifesaving. 2 coroner's inquiries have been conducted in the last 10 years, well, even less than that, probably the last 6 or 7 years, into deaths at their Australian championships. And I've read other reviews. I think Equestrian similarly had these issues where people rolled up to the coroner's court and said, I told so-and-so, or I told an official that I believed it was dangerous. They did nothing about it. And the first time the organisation formally became aware of the existence of those comments was when the person was in the witness stand. This was something I introduced into the surf lifesaving system, that if someone comes up to any official, and it's part of your briefings, your team managers' briefings, your officials' briefings, that if any person comes up to you, makes a comment or a complaint about safety, you take them serious, investigate it, risk assess that issue, and then consider independent review through your safety officer. Don't be afraid to just pause events until you deal with that particular issue. If someone's coming up to you and saying that they believe that the conditions are really quite dangerous or hazardous or whatever, don't start the next event. Deal with the issue, make wise decisions, and then either amend what you're doing or game on, continue on. It's about being proactive and recognising the issue and dealing with it. Dealing with emergencies is not a case of if but when. And I'm sure all of you, even at a local level, you've all experienced a boat overturning on the water and things like that. Make sure, plan for that, prepare for it. Make sure the right people are in charge and everyone knows who's in charge. I've often said that if an emergency situation happens and I'm in charge, and you watch this with police, fire, SES, everyone knows who's in charge, and there's little mumbo jumbo. There's no please, or would you mind doing this? It's clear, direct orders, clear directions. And that's really an important part of those sort of things. Have emergency action plans, and your safety operations manual on your website as a sample of one of those. It's always good to have these plans, but you need to exercise them. You need to test those plans. And if we get the opportunity later on, I'll put a scenario to you, but it really is quite important that every so often even in your club, just have the discussion around, so we're out, we're training out on the harbour, Cockle Bay, somewhere like that, boat overturns, what do we do? Just think about those sort of things. My last comment there is around standing people down. And this is a member welfare issue. It's not something that you may not have seen this too often, if at all, in dragon boating, but in some of the major events, people have dealt with tragic circumstances on several occasions, and they don't perform second and third time around because they're reliving some of the problems that they've had first time. But someone needs to take some leadership and tap someone on the shoulder and say, come on, mate, have a break and move on, and we'll look after you. I do want to stress that one. If I was to suggest what's best practice at an event, whether it's a regatta, it could be a training exercise, just a training program at your local club. You can deal with this. You can amend this to suit your purposes. Okay, before you get out on the water, start with a weather check and do a risk assessment and make sure you're all happy that the conditions are suitable, that the risk is tolerable, and you're happy to accept it. At a bigger event, you've got the appropriate resources in place before you start competition. The event organising committee has a clear recommendation or a resolution that the competition commences. And we've done that a number of times in other sports where the event organising committee meets at the start of the day, reviews all risks, says, yep, we're all good to go. Not bad practice at all. There's ongoing monitoring by your safety team, but everyone has a responsibility to do that. Continue to monitor any of the changing conditions, whether the weather changes, the water conditions change, things like that. That's always being monitored. Deal with those urgent issues immediately. Don't let them fester. Don't wait. Well, we've got a meeting. The group's getting together in an hour's time. I'll hold off till then. If it's an urgent issue that you believe needs to be dealt with, if your heart rate's increased because of your nervous levels, deal with it there and then. Please, my suggestion to you is don't hold off on that one. That is, in a nutshell, some good advice. Again, if I was going to suggest to you any resources in terms of safety, there's some good stuff on the Dragon Boat New South Wales website. Safety Operations Manual, it's an editable guide, and there's some notes in there how to use it to your advantage. Download that and use that. The Safe 365 app is brilliant, and I notice you use that particularly through the COVID process, but there's just so many ways you can use that to your advantage. And you know, again, on the Dragon Boat, the state website, there's risk registers, there's other manuals, and there's things to do to guide you through that whole risk process. Now, we're not going to go through because I'm going to wrap up. So with 10 minutes to go, I'll try and get to some of your questions. But this is a fairly easy one. Someone falls overboard in a boat at a region, or even just have a think about this even at your own club. It's a training session. Do you actually know what we do and how do we respond? Who are we calling? Who has the capability of undertaking the rescue? Where does if the person is more seriously injured, that all of a sudden you've now decided to ring 000, where does the ambulance go? You actually know those sort of things. So a takeaway, have a think about that. Just go back to your clubs and have a think, is this an area I can improve on? In wrapping up, some key takeaways for you. If I was going to say to you, don't risk assess, consider risk planning. It's something that continues to evolve. And it's done from the get-go. It's not done, it can be done on the spur of the moment, of course, if a risk all of a sudden appears and you need to deal with it, absolutely. But don't wait for that to occur before you decide to do some risk management. Use it as an opportunity. Seriously, it's a great opportunity to run better events, and being proactive. You proactively deal with issues as they arise, and you find that things run quite much more smoothly. If we're looking at a local level, promote your safe practices. Okay, I mentioned earlier on, it has the ability to improve retention for your members. They know that the organisation cares about them, cares about their safety. And people joining clubs look at a wide range of things when they do join a club, not just a sporting club, but a social club, a community group, those sort of things. This is a good one for you. If you promote it, use it to your advantage, that you're a safe organisation. Don't just do a risk assessment because Steve Leahy said it's good to do it. It's something that's done regularly. It's something that is reviewed on an ongoing basis. It's a risk management, your risk tables and your plans are all very, very dynamic. Some will drop off, then you'll realise there's a couple of new ones, okay? And practice those things regularly. If there's some things that we need to do on a regular basis, on an ongoing basis, make sure you do them. The final point I would suggest to you as I wrap this one up is that safety officers, your risk officers, it's not the most pleasing job, because you can sometimes be at the wrath. You're the bad guy. You're like the chief health officer at the moment, where you're like Dan Andrews, locking everyone up. You need to motivate them. That they have an important role, and it's a productive role. Make sure they remain valued within your organisation, within your clubs. Continue to motivate them and support them. There's my contact details. They're up on the screen. More than happy for you to reach out, either directly or via Shane and Ramsey. And that's probably a better move, because your questions will help the entire organisation instead of me responding directly to you. But Shane, and Ramsey, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I get to look at you again. Certainly happy to take your some questions.
Steve, before we go to the floor for asking questions, I've actually written some and I received some prior. So if you don't mind, if you got a few minutes for me to put you on a little bit of heat. So there's one thing I actually wrote some notes down throughout it, and we sort of didn't really get into, but it's COVID is such a hot topic right now. And my question is, but I want to frame it first, is, what can clubs and regatta hosts do to continue the operations to sort of balance the health and well-being versus a pandemic? But there's one thing I sort of want you to touch on, because it wasn't really, you hadn't spoken about too much there, is, balancing the health and well-being and a pandemic. So continuing a sport or a training session versus completely stopping sort of comes down to a level of tolerance. Would you agree? So can you just talk about some of that tolerance levels and why some clubs or regattas or events in general might shut down versus some being able to continue?
Yeah, sure, mate. This is very much around common sense. The whole COVID thing, as you're well aware, is evolving. We've seen people were starting to talk about the potential of a second wave. Well, that actually did happen. We don't know if the potential of a third wave will occur. The way we deal with it in Australia is very different to the way that is being dealt with overseas. The way individual states are dealing with it is also very, very differently. And I know the stuff that we were doing early in the piece, even drag and boat federations around the country, those state offices had different plans. The challenge that we've got is that we're guided by the politics of it all and the public health orders. We've got an obligation to obey those public health orders, and I think the social distancing rules are here to stay for a while. I think the upside to all of this is that, and that's certainly over the last few months I've been involved with it, and I'm very comfortable with the process that's been undertaken by the office and your board. But you've got a solid COVID safe plan. You're using the Safe 365 app for risk assessments at your training sessions, and you continue to be aware of what's going on around you. As I said, it's still continuing to evolve. I wouldn't have thought a week ago the health minister and the sports minister were all of a sudden going to bring in this regional stuff around community sport. That came out of the blue, and that's part of the challenge that we've got. I think we need to be alert, not alarmed, but we continue to follow the rules. And Dragon Boats, as a state organisation, is doing well. You continue to train, but it's those things that are in your COVID safe plan. Every club has that, and I'm aware that most, if not all, clubs have submitted COVID safe plans. It's in there about some of the guidelines around post and pre-training. Don't hang around, don't attend if you don't feel well. Some of us are more optimistic than others. Remember that the decision remains with you as an individual every single time. If you don't want to take part in any activity, forget Dragon Boats, you don't want to take part in any activity, you're not forced to, don't do it. Put yourself at the top of the tree on every occasion. That would be my general overarching advice, noting that this whole thing continues to evolve from day to day.
Still want to steal another couple of minutes and leave some for question.
All right.
Mate, one thing you mentioned, again, I wrote it down, was being qualified to take the role of a safety officer, and you've sat in coronial inquests where people haven't. So I guess my question is, and I'm sorry to put the burner on you, is we're getting it's when I say we're becoming stricter and stricter, it's because it's becoming stricter and stricter. So,
yes.
First of all, I mean, we've only got a couple of minutes, but training and recruiting people in that role is more challenging. It's challenging enough, but what training or courses, short courses that we can start pointing our members to actually start upskilling themselves, or as an organisation, we can start, giving them the right armoury, because there's nothing worse than putting someone in a position that they're actually not qualified for, and there's a big flow-on effect with welfare and so on. So, I mean, it's a big question, but if you got 30 seconds or so.
Yeah, thanks. I could just and ah for 29 seconds. It is. It's a brilliant question, because the answer is that I don't think there is one. Organisations are running their own courses. And they're being developed by good people with backgrounds in it, and every course is different. There's some training in the standard officials accreditation programs, but look, as this whole area evolves, we have a look at sports like equestrian, water skiing, surf lifesaving. They've all evolved and developed their own courses as a result of the problems that they have. And there are two real sides to this, particularly with aquatic sport. One is that whole safety, the OC health and workplace or site safety, and then there's the emergency management side. Two very different things, but unfortunately, it's the same person doing the same job. I think it's only a matter of time. Sounds like something Risk Intelligence should do, mate.
Good upsell, hey? Hey, just last one, and it's pretty relevant. you know, in terms of safety maturity, it's fair to say that sports in general, apart from the ones that have actually had something happen to them, because it's the old notion in sport, it's all good until it's not, right? And why we're doing this particular session and sessions like this is so we can actually try and mitigate that as best as we possibly can. But it's fair to say that a lot of sports have got that low maturity, and we fit that bill, like most sports, to be fair. But you can't fix everything overnight. So again, a huge question. We could probably take this offline later with it, you know, with a written version. But what should we initially focus on? Because it's such a big beast of a topic.
Yeah.
Where do we start?
I think the answer is reasonably easy. First up, from the outset, I want you to feel comfortable, and not just you, Shane, and your board members that are online, but your club members as well. I actually think you're far more risk mature than a lot of other organisations that I work with. So, and I've seen the maturity in the development of your safety guides and your manuals, your risk register, the use of the app and things like that. You're not doing too bad at all compared to some others. Risk maturity, it really starts with the board, both of Dragon Boats New South Wales, and your individual clubs, and that's the committee of your clubs. If there's no genuine commitment or support from those levels, you've got little help or little hope of the rest of your club getting on board. It can't be commitment based simply because we don't say, yeah, we'll do risk management because Dragon Boats New South Wales says so. It's got to be a genuine agreement that we're going to do this. There's certainly no need, and I'm talking to the club, our club delegates that are online, there's no need to reinvent the wheel because Dragon Boats New South Wales already has the resources. It doesn't need to be the entire board. Have a subcommittee of your board, of your committee. They've got a clear charter around risk. It's about behaviour. We can all be change agents simply by doing little things. Picking up a paddle that's left on a path, lightening the load by helping someone to lift a boat, creating that example. I'm sure many of us have done SWOT analysis at work. Do that instead of using the big terms of risk management. Risk really comes down to looking for the weaknesses and threats in our organisation and improving on those, and using the opportunities and our strengths to build a better organisation. If we think along those lines, what are the opportunities I can exploit? What are the weaknesses I need to build on? I think we'll see a culture that you can easily work with and grow.
Thanks, Steve. If you don't mind going over by just a few minutes,
Sure.
Just because I haven't been able to go to the floor because I took over.
How unusual.
Yeah, I know. Everyone online probably agrees with this too. That's why they're all on mute. I
can see some faces laughing, and I think someone just took a huge big scull of red wine there too, by the looks of it.
I've got if you do have a question, just throw on the bottom of your screen. There's a reactions thing. There's a hand mark. You'll see mine go up now. Just put that up if you've got a question. But I've just got sent one directly to me from Melanie. So Rams, if you can take Melanie Cantwell offline, she's got a question about near miss. And again, if anyone else has a question, please put your hand up via that emoji.
Yeah, and someone has sent me a message. Martin sent me a message as well about near misses, particularly around insurance claims. How could we set up a reporting system so that all clubs learn from issues that they may never have thought of? Good call, and I think that's an organisational thing. I think we have to have the maturity to have a no blame culture, and risk and safety has to be about learnings after what we call in the emergency services is called after action reviews, no blame culture, and it's about letting others know. I know we're at the helicopter service. Every issue was debriefed. Anything that we learned to improve on, we promulgated that not only amongst our own bases, but amongst the industry as well. And that's something that has potential for Shane to lead through Dragon Boats. And people, but having said that, number one, no blame culture. It can be anonymous. Take out the identifying issues like time and date and location, and report it and share it. That's a really good move. Melanie Campbell's online.
It's okay. Mel, are you there? Did you have another question? Or do we just cover that? No.
No, Shane, it's me. I'm using Melanie's thing. So yes, it was answered. Thank you.
Okay.
No, was that you, Martin? Was it much deeper voice than Melanie? And I know Shane mentioned that I actually did some water safety nearly 15, 20 years ago with Melanie Cantwell when she was starting out dragon boating on Sydney Harbour. I was doing all the water safety for her. So we go back a little bit.
Before I pick on anyone else, is there any other questions? Otherwise, you might get called from the floor. Anyone?
It looks all pretty easy.
Yeah, it looks like there's a few nods going around. Steve, I might wrap it up there then. I know you've you donated your time tonight, so greatly appreciate you giving that up. And thank you to everyone else for coming online. It's our first session of this, and I hope it's something that we can continually, grow and evolve and get better at. But Steve, very much really appreciate you, and I can see all the comments coming up. This will be stored on our resources page on the DRAGO website. So please, when it does get uploaded, send it around. This is, designed so your club members are learning as much as possible.
Welcome. And maybe if anyone gets the opportunity to try on a parachute, do it.
But I don't think there's any other questions. I think Mel Wilson said no, she won't do that. And I don't think many of us are flying right now either. But look, I do thank you for your time. And again, everyone else online, it's been a really worthwhile session. I know that even I've done this kind of stuff for a while, and you always pick up new things. And so, and again, to not only our guys watching within the state, but there's also, other members within Australia watching, and also internationally. I can see some of the comments popping up now. So thank you for joining us online. And look, the next one will be in about a month's time. It won't be with Steve, but what we can do, if there's enough requests, Steve, we could probably look at a more in-depth one with you on this particular stuff. If the members are coming, if I'm getting inundated with emails or comments over the next couple of days, we'll actually put something on and actually ask what they need and what resources and support they need. So yeah, greatly appreciate your time. And again, thank you everyone. It's dinner time. So you have a good night and a good weekend.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Good night, all.
Bye-bye.
Good night.